During Gamescom, I had the great pleasure of being invited by Nintendo along with Nintendan to play a little bit more of Link's Awakening. That will say the portion that was not in the regular E3 and Gamescom demos. And while being invited to this event, we were allowed to capture some footage also for you from the Key Cavern. That is the third dungeon in Link's Awakening, which is heavily a bomb-based dungeon. So we are allowed to show you some sections of this dungeon, not everything, obviously. Me and Nintendo will be talking a little bit about the structure of the dungeon and our impressions with it. And also a little bit later on about the chamber dungeon, which we don't have gameplay of, but which we'll be talking over while using E3 gameplay, since they were capturing direct footage of that there. So we have around 10 minutes to talk about the Key Cavern, and what was your impressions, since this is a very interesting dungeon, since it brings back the Pegasus Boots. Yes. That we have seen it in a few games as of late. We had it in A Link Between Worlds last time, and it's always great to see the Pegasus Boots, and also playing traditional dungeons, since we didn't have them in Breath of the Wild.
For sure. With the Key Cavern, it's important in a few ways, mostly because it's a very tight dungeon and also very stacked. I mean stacked in the directions that you go, because from the get-go, it can be a bit disorienting, but once you move to a certain floor, there are various floors you have to open with keys after keys after keys. So you have to constantly take out enemies and get through the dungeon well, and pretty much stay on your feet. Once you get through that section, there's also one where you have to throw bombs in the face of
the Dodongo snakes, yeah.
The Dodongo snakes, yes. Which can prove kind of challenging. Like, they mix it up a little bit. Like, you have to be more precise with your movement, because it will quickly move out of the way than it used to, especially if you already put a bomb in its mouth previously. But they're very quick to turn, so you constantly have to stay on your feet, do what you can to take them out, and constantly keep like have some spatial awareness of what is going on, and that makes this dungeon one of the more interesting ones of the original, and definitely it kind of lives that with this remake.
Yeah, I have a feeling that this dungeon could become one of the big 2D Zelda dungeon classics, especially now with its reimagined design, because we all know it was very limited in 8-bit on the Game Boy. Now you have HD graphics and kind of 2D, 3D approach to the top-down perspective. And also when you bring up the Dodongo snakes, I have to say that it's almost as if you need to feed them. It's pretty much just like you had to throw bombs into the face of King Dodongo in Ocarina of Time.
For sure.
Because otherwise they will just move out of your path and you will be wasting bombs, which we unfortunately fell victim to when we didn't realize that you needed to stand right next to it so that you would just swallow it in the next frame and then blow up.
For sure. And it's also very interesting in how like the map is redesigned, because it used to be like everything had to fit on a singular screen. So when you look at the Game Boy Color game or the original Game Boy game, I prefer the Game Boy Color game because the palette of color really reminds me of this one. It really had to fit on a singular Game Boy screen with also the UI of the hearts and everything. Now, because this is a widescreen, they also took the liberty of making it way bigger. So not everything exactly fits on one screen anymore, so also have to look around a bit more, which gives that more of that old school Zelda feel.
Absolutely, it feels proportional. It feels like a proper 2D Zelda dungeon, and that's another thing about Link's Awakening. It's a game that is just like it was the case for Metroid 2, because we had the pleasure of sitting with a representative of the kind of European Treehouse team that was conducting the live streams of Link's Awakening and other games during Gamescom for Nintendo of Europe. Yes. And we also asked the question, is this game a remake? But it is a reimagination. So in many ways, the same that was the case for Metroid 2, that will say Samus Returns on the 3DS. And you get that feeling. It's kind of a different game. It's the same game, but at the same time it plays kind of different compared to what it was in the case of the Game Boy.
For sure, it feels more like a whole place, because Spatial was very limited in the original, but this feels like much more proper, like a Zelda game now. Not that like the original didn't feel like one, but it had the limitations of how the dungeons could be designed. Now they feel kind of proper, and you kind of feel disoriented because you kind of have to feel where you are now. And it makes it a bit more exciting for me too. It's coming out on the same day of the Switch Lite, and of course everything is relative. But there's always somebody new to a Zelda game. Always. Same goes with Mario, same goes with any other franchise. There's always something new to the game. And not knowing where everything is placed can be very irritating to them. Outside of that though, I do feel that it's doing a good job of reimagining the game that many people, including us, likely played all those years ago.
Absolutely.
Which is another factor that needs to keep in mind as well.
And it feels like a breath of fresh air as well, having being able to once again play through dungeons. And we need to remember, this is kind of the first time on the Switch where we are playing through actual Zelda dungeons. Since we don't have any other Zelda games with proper Zelda dungeons, if you don't count obviously Hyrule Castle or the final trial and Breath of the Wild, but one was DLC and the other one is, well, the final dungeon in the
the
game.
Original Zelda is a bit more open in that regard, and it's not really the same thing. It's like a bit more structured than that. I feel that Link's Awakening has a bit more of an open approach to it than like Zelda 1. So this feels a lot more like the first proper dungeons indeed on Switch.
Exactly, but then again, Link's Awakening is a very different Zelda game. It's a Zelda game that has very much of a Mario flair, with Mario enemies and objects, and it makes sense because the game was developed by Mario icons, Tezuka-san, Miyamoto-san, and also had music by Koizumi. Yeah, Koizumi. This was in many ways his debut when it came to making game stories, Link's Awakening. Yeah. And that's why it's also very important to him and why he had a lot of pride when he presented it at the end of the February Nintendo Direct. So,
absolutely, yeah.
The way I see it is that this is a game that everyone who maybe is a little bit tired of both the old, especially the old Zelda formula, will find a lot of enjoyment through, because not too many people have played Link's Awakening. I think it's this and the Oracle games that are the least played games, since it's kind of hard to find a functioning copy for the Game Boy these days, but also replaying it there. And then again, on the Virtual Console, it was only available on the 3DS. And there you had many other Zelda games to play, so why would you play Link's Awakening?
I mean, I played Link's Awakening on 3DS a couple of times.
And one of the new elements, as we were able to experience, was the chamber dungeon section. We don't have footage of it, so you'll have to be satisfied with the E3 footage. But building dungeon sections is more difficult than it sounds.
Right.
Even on the simplest forms that you need to fill out, making dungeon rooms and chambers that function well with each other is way more challenging than it may appear at first.
Yeah, you cannot simply place anything the way you like. There are specific rules in place that make everything tick. For example, if you place a certain room with certain hallways, other rooms can only be attached to those hallways. You cannot randomly throw stuff together and hope it fits somehow. It needs to work within the boundaries, and you need to have a consistent loop from room to room. May they be boss, may they be regular rooms. It needs to all be a cohesive place.
Yeah, it all needs to be connected. And but then again, it gives you a lot of variety as you unlock more and more the deeper you get into the game.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And this is also one thing we talked about with the representative from Nintendo of Europe, is this kind of more of a post game, because it gives the impression of it, because if you want to make the more sophisticated dungeons, you kind of need to have beaten most of the dungeons, because the more dungeons you complete, the more options you get when it comes to the chamber dungeon section, or dungeon arranger for those who prefer that one.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. It needs to be coherent that way, and I really get the feeling that it's going to be a lot of fun, like putting random stuff together and see how it all works out in the end. I'm really looking forward to it. It's you can't really share these as far as we know.
Online, this is no Mario Maker, because we asked the same the two persons that were guiding us through this experience if this will be kind of a Mario Maker experience where you can share your dungeons online for other people to try, comment, and give their feedback on. No, this is more of a local thing. So it means that
you can hand the controller to somebody and see if they can finish it, which is still fun. I think that's still fun to do, and make a challenge out of it. But it's it would have been nicer if you could share at least a limited form of this to other people. Especially
since these type of dungeon layouts incentivizes a lot of speedrunning. You even have a clock there that sees how fast you can get through this chamber, and thus also have the option of replaying different boss fights from the game. So you don't have a built-in boss rush mode, but by creating these chambers, you can replay or even exercise on bosses when it comes to speedrunning. And this is a great tool for speedrunners, no doubt. So
it's kind of a wait-and-see approach. I mean, I'm very excited for either end, like making the dungeons and playing for the game itself. There are some quirks, like especially when it pertains to more modern games, but overall, though, I'm just really looking forward to it.
Exactly, and some of the chambers you might also recognize from the dungeon we played, since it was in the reveal trailer for Link's Awakening. But I think this sums it up also in terms of what we are allowed to show to you and talk about. And if you have any other questions that you may have about the dungeon and in regards to the chamber dungeon section, we are more than willing to reply to some of your comments below. I think that was a good summary, Nintendo, and thank you so much for joining in.
No worries.
And as always, we'll have another Zelda video up this Friday. But until then, at least make sure to leave a like under this video, since we put a lot of effort. And also when it comes to the game itself, which is just a few weeks away. Actually, we are less than 3 weeks away at this point. So we are very much looking forward to playing the full game, which will be out on September 20th. Once again, Nintendo, thank you so much, and thank you to everyone else. And we hope you enjoyed this video. We'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.